The stars outside the viewport looked wrong. Lieutenant Cole Harris pressed his face closer to the glass like a man who did not trust his own instruments. The stars were arranged in patterns he had never seen before. No familiar constellations. No known nebulae. Just a deep and heavy darkness filled with unfamiliar lights, stretching out in every direction with no end in sight. He turned back to his console and ran the calculation again. The answer came back the same as before. They were not in their galaxy anymore. "Captain," he said quietly, "you are going to want to see this." Captain Lena Grant walked out of her office and onto the bridge with a coffee mug in one hand and a tablet in the other. She was a tall woman with short brown hair and calm gray eyes that had seen too many bad days to be easily impressed. She set the mug down and looked at Harris's screen. She read the numbers. Then she read them again. "How far?" she asked. "Far enough that none of our charts match anything out there," he said. "The wormhole must have been unstable. We came out on the other side of something very, very big." Captain Grant stood still for a moment. The bridge around her was quiet. The crew was watching her, waiting to see how she would react. That was always how it worked. The captain set the mood. If she panicked, they panicked. If she stayed steady, they stayed steady. She picked up her coffee mug and took a slow sip. "All right," she said. "Run a full sensor sweep. Log everything we can see. Send out a standard distress signal on all frequencies and let the ship know what happened. No point in hiding it." She paused. "And someone fix the coffee machine in the engine bay. Ray has been complaining about it for 3 days." The crew relaxed slightly and went back to their stations. The USS Iron Meridian was not a young ship. She had been built during the worst years of the resource wars, when humanity needed warships fast and did not have the time to make them pretty. She was long and heavy and covered in the kind of damage that comes from surviving battles that were not supposed to be survivable. Her hull was patched in dozens of places. Her main cannon housing was scorched black from a plasma strike that had happened 4 years ago and had never quite been repaired properly. She looked, to anyone who saw her for the first time, like a ship that had been through hell and had kept going anyway. In her own galaxy, that was not unusual. Most of humanity's warships looked like that. The distress signal went out. For 3 hours, nothing happened. The crew catalogued stars and mapped the local space around them. Engineer Ray Dunbar fixed the coffee machine in the engine bay and announced this loudly over the intercom. Dr. Patricia Wade, the ship's linguist, began scanning for any kind of signal or communication in the nearby space, running the results through her translation programs and finding nothing she recognized. Then, just as the ship's clock ticked past the 3rd hour, something appeared on the long-range sensors. It was small. Much smaller than the Iron Meridian. It had the shape of something designed for patrol work rather than combat, with a smooth hull and no visible heavy weapons. It was moving toward them slowly, the way something moves when it is not sure what it is approaching. Harris brought it up on the main screen. The ship was unlike anything in their database. Its design was completely foreign, built on principles that did not match any human engineering school. It was, in the most complete sense of the word, alien. "They picked up our signal," said First Officer Derek Cole from the station beside the captain's chair. He was a broad-shouldered man with a quiet voice and the habit of stating the obvious in a way that somehow made it useful. "They are coming to look. Then we make sure they like what they see," said Captain Grant. "Stand down all weapon systems. Run up the identification lights. Let them get a good look at us." On the bridge of the small patrol vessel, a Velhari commander named Sarovel sat with his hands very still on his armrest and stared at the thing that had appeared on his screen. It was enormous. It was scarred and dark and covered in the evidence of terrible violence. It was pointing its lights at him like a creature trying to seem friendly. He sat there for a long time. Then he hit the emergency communication button and began talking very fast. The footage arrived at Central Command on Vadris Prime 11 hours after Sarovel sent it. By the time it reached the desk of Grand Admiral Orvek, it had already passed through 4 levels of intelligence review, 3 separate analysis teams, and 1 very long meeting in which nobody agreed on anything except that what they were looking at was deeply unusual. Orvek watched the footage alone in his office, with the lights low and a cup of cold tea sitting forgotten beside him. He watched the Iron Meridian sitting in open space, massive and still, with its identification lights blinking in a slow and patient rhythm. He watched the numbers his analysts had run along the bottom of the screen. Length. Massachusetts estimated weapon yield. Engine output. He watched those numbers for a long time. Then he called his aide and told him to cancel everything for the rest of the day. The emergency council session was called within the hour. 17 species sat around the great circular table in the central chambers of Vadris Prime, which had hosted 3,000 years of galactic peace and had never once seen a moment like this one. Representatives from the Velhari, the Dreth, the Kassani, the Miran, and 13 other races all stared at the same footage on the same screens and came to the same uncomfortable conclusion. They had no idea what this was. "The ship shows no record in any database," said the head of Imperial Intelligence, a tall Dreth named Avon Cor, who was known for never showing emotion and who was currently showing quite a lot of it. "No known civilization in this galaxy has produced anything approaching this level of engineering. The weapon signatures do not match any catalogued technology. The power output is inconsistent with what we understand to be possible." "Inconsistent how?" asked one of the council members. Avon Cor paused. "It should not be able to do what our sensors say it can do. And yet the readings are consistent across multiple independent scans." The room was quiet for a moment. "Where did it come from?" asked another council member. "We believe through the wormhole event that was detected near the outer rim 3 days ago," Avon Cor said. "Our working theory is that the ship passed through from somewhere outside our galaxy." Another long quiet. Grand Admiral Orvek leaned forward in his chair. He was an old Velhari with pale blue skin and deep-set eyes that had watched a lot of bad situations develop over a long career. He had a habit of asking the question nobody else wanted to ask. "Have they made any aggressive moves?" he said. "No," said Avon, "sir. None. They sent a distress signal. They have held their position. They turned off their weapons when our patrol ship approached. They appear to be waiting." "Waiting for what?" "We believe they want help finding their way home." Orvek looked at the footage again. The Iron Meridian sat in space like an old mountain. Patient. Unmoving. Not threatening. Just there. Back on the Iron Meridian, Dr. Patricia Wade had been awake for 22 hours. She sat at her station surrounded by empty water bottles and handwritten notes, running every signal she could detect through every translation program she had. Most of it was noise. Some of it was structured. A small part of that structure was starting to look like language. "I think they are talking about us," she said to nobody in particular. Derek Cole appeared beside her with a sandwich and set it down next to her keyboard. "Eat something," he said. "You look like a distress signal yourself." She smiled without looking up. "I am getting patterns. Not full translation yet, but there is definitely grammar in here. Repeated structures. Formal patterns. This is a communication system built by people who talk to each other a lot." "Well," said Cole, "that is either very good or very bad." "All communication is like that," she said, and finally picked up the sandwich. 3 Empire warships arrived 6 hours later and took up positions around the Iron Meridian. From the outside, they were arranged in a classic containment formation, which any military officer would recognize as a way of saying you are surrounded. Captain Grant looked at the formation on her tactical screen and then looked at Derek Cole. "They are nervous," she said. "Reasonable," he said. "Yes," she agreed. She keyed the intercom. "This is the captain. 3 ships have taken positions around us. We are standing down all weapons and holding our position. Everyone stay calm and stay professional. We are going to make friends today." She clicked off the intercom and turned back to the screen. "Probably." On the lead Empire vessel, the commander watching the human ship's weapons power down stared at his screen with an expression his crew had never seen on his face before. In 20 years of service, he had surrounded a great many ships. None of them had ever just turned their weapons off and waited. He did not know what to do with that. He sent another report to Central Command and waited for instructions. Patricia Wade made the breakthrough at 4 in the morning, ship time, when most of the bridge crew was running on caffeine and determination. The translation program had finally found enough repeated structures to build a working framework. It was not perfect. Large parts of it were still guesswork. But when the next signal came in from the Empire ships outside, she was able to read about 60% of it. She read it twice. Then she laughed quietly to herself and went to find the captain. Captain Grant was in her office, asleep in her chair with a tablet on her chest and her boots still on. Wade knocked on the open door frame. Grant was awake immediately, the way soldiers learn to be awake, with her eyes open and her mind already running. "I can talk to them," Wade said. Grant was on her feet in 3 seconds. The communication channel opened with a series of formal tones from the Empire's side. Wade responded with matching tones that she had identified as acknowledgement signals. There was a pause. Then a voice came through, and Wade began to translate in real time, speaking quietly into Grant's earpiece while Grant spoke aloud for both sides of the conversation. "We are the crew of the USS Iron Meridian," Grant said, in a calm and clear voice. "We entered your space by accident through an unstable wormhole. We have no hostile intentions. We are asking for assistance in locating a route back to our own galaxy. We are happy to answer any questions you have about us." Wade translated. There was a long pause on the other side. Then a different voice came on. Older. More formal. Wade identified the speech patterns as belonging to someone very senior. "This is Grand Admiral Orvek of the Galactic Empire," Wade translated for Grant. "You are surrounded by Imperial warships. You will explain your presence here in full detail." Grant nodded slowly. "Tell him I understand his concern. Tell him we are surrounded and we are still not pointing any weapons at him, and I think that should count for something." She paused. "Tell him I would also like to invite him aboard for tea, if he has time." Wade translated. There was another long pause from the Empire side. Then something happened that Wade had not heard before in any of the signals. A short, sharp sound. Repeated twice. She was not entirely sure, but it sounded like it might have been laughter. The Empire sent a representative instead of the Admiral. His name was Sorrow, the same young Velhari officer who had first spotted the Iron Meridian at the Outer Rim. He had volunteered for this. His commanding officer had tried to talk him out of it 3 times. He had volunteered anyway, because he was 26 years old and this was the most interesting thing that had ever happened in his lifetime and he was not going to miss it. He came aboard in a small shuttle and was met in the docking bay by Derek Cole and 2 crew members. He was shorter than the humans by about a head. He had pale skin with faint blue markings along his jaw and large eyes that were currently very wide. He looked around the docking bay. It was enormous. The ceiling was high and the walls were thick, and everything about the ship up close was even more impressive than it had been on a screen. There were scorch marks on the interior walls. There were repair patches on the ceiling. There was a smell of metal and oil and something else he could not identify. A human walked past carrying a large tool and nodded at him the way a person nods at a neighbor they pass every morning. Sorrow followed Cole through the ship. They passed crew members going about ordinary work. A woman was arguing cheerfully with a computer terminal about power allocation. 2 men were playing cards in a side corridor on a crate that had been turned into a table. Someone was singing off-key from inside an access panel. They passed through the engine section, where Ray Dunbar was elbow-deep in a secondary relay housing and did not look up when they passed. "Coffee machine's broken again," Dunbar said to nobody. Sorrow looked at Cole. Cole shrugged. "It's always the coffee machine," he said. They arrived at the main meeting room where Captain Grant was waiting. She stood when Sorrow entered and offered her hand. He looked at it for a moment, then took it and shook it, because Wade had briefed him on the gesture. "Thank you for coming," Grant said. "I know this is strange for everyone. It is strange for us too." Sorrow looked at her. She did not look like a conqueror. She looked like someone who had been awake too long and was trying to be polite about a difficult situation. "Your ship," he said, through Wade's translation. "In our fleet records, there is nothing like it." "No," said Grant. "There wouldn't be." "The damage on the exterior," he said carefully. "Those are weapon marks." "Yes." "From a battle." "From several," she said simply. He was quiet for a moment. "And the enemy that did that damage," he said. "Are they still out there? In your galaxy?" Grant looked at him steadily. "Some of them," she said. "We are working on it." Sorrow sat down slowly. He had a great many more questions. He suspected the answers were going to be extremely unsettling. The council had been arguing for 6 hours straight when the alarm came through. It started as a low signal from the border monitoring stations, the kind of signal that usually meant a small skirmish or a supply ship running late. The duty officer flagged it, passed it up the chain, and within 20 minutes it had landed on Grand Admiral Orvek's desk with a note attached that said simply, "Keth Movement, Outer Border, Sector 7. Orvek read it and felt the familiar cold weight settle in his chest. The Keth separatists had been a problem for 30 years. They operated out of the unmapped regions near the Outer Rim, raiding border settlements, attacking supply lines, and disappearing back into the dark before the Empire's response ships could arrive. The Empire had never been able to stop them entirely. The Keth were fast and they were ruthless, and they picked their targets carefully. They had apparently now picked the worst possible target. The intelligence report came in 2 hours later. The Keth had detected the Iron Meridian. They had also detected that 3 Imperial warships were stationed nearby, which in Keth thinking meant that something valuable was in the area. They were moving in force, 12 ships, which was the largest Keth fleet anyone had seen operating together in a decade. The council's argument stopped immediately. "They want the human ship," said Avensior flatly. "Or the technology on it." "They will not succeed," said Orvek. "No," agreed Avensior. "But people on the border settlements will die while we stop them." On the Iron Meridian, Sorrow was in the middle of explaining the history of the Galactic Empire to Wade and Cole when the alert came through from the Empire ships outside. Wade translated quickly. Cole listened with a flat expression that Sorrow was beginning to understand meant the man was calculating something. 12 ships, Cole said. "Coming in fast from the Outer Rim." Sorrow stood up. "I need to contact my commander immediately. The Empire will respond, but it will take time to bring enough ships to the border. The Keth are experienced at hit and run. By the time our fleet arrives, they will have already—" "Hang on," said Cole. He was already walking toward the door. "Let me talk to the captain." He found Grant on the bridge, watching the tactical display. The Keth fleet was showing up clearly on the Iron Meridian's long-range sensors, which were significantly better than anything the Empire had in the area. Grant could see the formation, the speed, the heading. She could also see 3 small settlement markers on the edge of the Empire's border maps that Sorrow had shared with them during the first day of communication. "If they hold that heading," said Harris from the navigation station, "those settlements are right in their path." Grant looked at the screen for about 4 seconds. "Battle stations," she said. The Iron Meridian came alive. It was not a dramatic change, not on the outside. The ship did not suddenly glow or make loud noises. It simply shifted, the way a sleeping animal shifts when it wakes up. Power moved through systems that had been at rest. Weapon housings rotated to ready positions. The engine output increased in a smooth and practiced climb. Sorrow, who had followed Cole back to the bridge, stood near the door and watched this happen. He had never seen a warship go to combat readiness so quickly and so quietly. His own species' warships sounded alarms. Lights flashed. Crews ran. This felt like the ship had simply decided to do something and was now doing it. "We are going to help," Grant said to Sorrow, without looking away from her screen. "Tell your people to hold back and give us room." Sorrow relayed this. There was a long silence from the Empire side. Then an acknowledgement. The Iron Meridian moved. Chief Weapons Officer Dana Cole, no relation to the first officer, sat at her station with the calm focus of someone doing a job she had done many times before. She called out targets by number. She adjusted firing solutions with small corrections and steady hands. She reported each engagement in the same tone she used when running training exercises. Target 3, neutralized. Target 4, moving to intercept. Correction applied. Target 4, neutralized. Targets 5 and 6 are splitting. Recommend we take 5 first. Angle gives us a cleaner shot on 6 immediately after. The Keth fleet had not expected this. They were fast and experienced and had fought the Empire's warships many times. They had plans for that. They had no plans for a ship that moved like a mountain and hit like one too, that seemed to absorb their return fire without slowing, that tracked them across open space with a patience that felt almost personal. 11 minutes and 40 seconds after the Iron Meridian engaged, the remaining Keth ships turned and ran. Dana Cole noted the time and filed it in her log. On the Empire flagship, The commander who had surrounded the Iron Meridian 3 days ago sat in his chair and watched the battle footage replay on his screen. The Keth had terrorized this border for 30 years. They had attacked 17 settlements. They had destroyed 6 Imperial patrol vessels. The Iron Meridian had ended them in under 12 minutes without taking any damage worth recording. The commander sat there for a while. Then he sent a message to Central Command. It said only, "We need to be very nice to these people." The vote in the Galactic Council was unanimous, which was something that had not happened in 40 years. Every species at the table, all 17 of them, raised their hand in favor of assisting the humans in finding their way home and extending a formal diplomatic greeting to humanity as a whole. The debate that had been running for days ended in about 20 minutes. There was not much left to argue about after watching the battle footage. Grand Admiral Orvek did not vote, because his role was advisory rather than legislative, but he stood at the back of the chamber with his arms folded and watched the hands go up with something that was either relief or deep worry. He had not quite decided which. The Empire's best navigation scientists were assigned to the project immediately. They were joined by a team from the Iron Meridian that included Harris, Wade, and a young engineer named Pete Lang who had an unusual talent for making complicated things simple. The work took place on a shared workspace that was set up in a neutral section of the Iron Meridian's lower decks, with Empire scientists on one side and humans on the other, all of them crowded around maps and sensor data and arguing cheerfully in 3 different languages. It took 4 days. During those 4 days, Sorrow barely slept. He moved through the Iron Meridian like a man who was afraid of waking up and finding it was all a dream. He talked to anyone who would talk to him. He sat with Ray Dunbar while Dunbar fixed things, because Dunbar fixed things constantly and seemed to enjoy having company. He sat with Wade while she worked on the translation program, adding new vocabulary every hour. He sat with Cole and watched the first officer run through his daily reports with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been doing this for many years. On the 3rd day, Dunbar finally got the coffee machine in the engine bay working properly. He made a cup for Sorrow and handed it over with the expression of a man offering something important. Sorrow drank it. He found it extremely bitter and completely unpleasant. "Good," said Dunbar. "Very good," said Sorrow, because Dunbar looked so pleased that it seemed wrong to say otherwise. On the 4th day, Harris announced that they had the wormhole coordinates. The math checked out across both human and Empire systems. The Iron Meridian could go home. Captain Grant was brought before the full Galactic Council the following morning. She came alone, wearing her dress uniform, which was cleaner than her usual jacket but still showed the fading marks of long service. She stood at the center of the council chamber and faced 17 species who had never met a human before 3 days ago. The council asked many questions. Grant answered all of them without hesitation. She talked about humanity's history, the wars, the hard years, the slow and difficult process of surviving long enough to reach the stars. She talked about what humans wanted from the universe. "We want to explore," she said, when the council asked directly. "We want to trade, where that is possible. We want to be left in peace to do those things, and we will extend the same respect to others that we ask for ourselves." A council member from the Kasani species leaned forward. "And if that peace is not extended to you?" Grant was quiet for a moment. "Then we handle it," she said simply. The chamber was quiet after that. Before the Iron Meridian left, Grant handed Sorrow a data package. It contained basic information about humanity, a set of communication frequencies, and a formal diplomatic message addressed to the Galactic Empire. She had written it herself, in the ship's early morning hours when the bridge was quiet. "If anyone ever finds the way back to our galaxy," she said to Sorrow, "tell them to call ahead." Sorrow held the data package carefully. He had been given many important objects during his career. None of them had felt like this. "Will you come back?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "Space is very large. But the universe has a way of bringing people together when there is a reason." She offered her hand, and he took it. "It was good to meet you, Sorrow." The Iron Meridian passed through the wormhole that afternoon. One moment it was there, enormous and scarred and patient. Then it was not. The space it had occupied felt very empty. That evening, Grand Admiral Orvek stood alone at the wide viewport in his private office on Vadris Prime and looked out at the stars. The lights of the capital city spread below him, warm and familiar, the same lights he had looked at for 40 years of service. His aide knocked and entered. "The Council is requesting your assessment for the new strategic review," the aide said. "They want your recommendations on how to classify humanity in the Imperial record. Friend, unknown, neutral, or potential threat." Orvek did not turn from the window. "Look up the definition of all 4 of those," he said quietly. "Then tell me which one applies to a species that crossed an entire galaxy by accident, spent 4 days teaching our scientists new mathematics, fixed our border problem in 11 minutes, and then said goodbye and left without asking for anything." The aide was quiet for a moment. "None of them seem to fit exactly," he said. "No," said Orvek. "They don't." He was quiet for a long time. "Write a new category. Something that means, we are very glad they are not angry with us." He finally turned from the window. "And begin drafting a full review of our military expansion program. Because if one lost human ship looks like that, I would very much like to know what their navy looks like when it is not lost." The aide left. Orvek turned back to the stars. Somewhere out there, past the edge of everything the Empire knew, humanity was going home. He hoped, very sincerely, that they were happy there.